I just had the 2-year anniversary of a business that I started completely on accident. That business made 6 figures in its first year, and it had a 50% increase in revenue this year. And when I say that it happened on accident, I don't make it to sound like everything was just handed to me, because let me tell you, this was a messy, messy 2 years. I want to make this video because I feel like so many people, when they talk about how they got where they're going, they glaze over all of the messiness and they start to paint their success with this perfect paintbrush. And I don't think they necessarily do that on purpose. I just think in hindsight, you see things differently than you did when you were actually in the moment. The person I'm making this video for is that person who knows that they want to start something. They want to build a life for themselves. They don't want to be always working for somebody else, or they want to figure out how they can build a life on their own terms, but they feel like they have to have this perfect plan to start. They feel like they aren't good enough, or they don't have all the things together in order to do that. I'm here to tell you that my entire 2 years has been one giant exercise of learning to adapt and figure it the fuck out. If you haven't started something yet, I hope this video gives you that permission to start. And if you're in the middle of building something right now and you think that everybody has these secrets to success that you don't, I hope this video provides you some relief, but also maybe hands you some of these things to think about that will actually help you further yourself. So this business was not my first experience making money online. When I was around 17, I started posting my progress as a martial artist. I really documented my journey from becoming an average Taekwondo athlete who'd been training for most of his life to becoming someone who was exceptional. I built an audience on Instagram of around 15,000 people. I had a YouTube audience of around 70,000 people. And I made a course talking about flexibility as it particularly pertains to martial arts, which was my very niche, intricate place that allowed me to make money. Doing that got me through college without having to go work a traditional job. I bring this up because my first hurdle to stepping into the person that I am now is letting go of who I was. I had gotten so well known for what I could do with my body, but my dream my entire life was to have a voice and be able to think and for people to care about the way that I think. But I stayed stuck doing that for years because it was the first real thing that I had built myself that had any kind of success. And at the time, I felt like I was just lucky enough to find the right thing at the right time for it to work, instead of understanding that it worked because of how good I am at that thing, how much time and effort I put into doing that thing. And so eventually I got completely burned out by it, and I took like a year and a half off from creating content consistently. I then graduated college. I got a job working at an agency where I was doing social media management for hotels. I used that for 6 months to then get me a job as a social media director for a startup company, a startup agency, where I got to work with a range of different clients doing social media management and strategy for them. I always loved social media and saw it as this way to give people a voice, even if they don't have access to connections or resources. But I didn't really get to feel that fulfillment in the 9-to-5 jobs that I was doing, because we were working with like companies and brands, not individuals. So while I was working that social media director position, I started posting on TikTok. At that time, I had no idea what I wanted to post about. I just knew that I really missed the process of creating something and putting it out there. So I was doing everything. And I think this is the first thing that I want to offer you in this video. If you want to build something, but you're not entirely sure what you want to build, the best thing that you can do is not listen to advice around niching down or no having a strategy or whatever. Like, the first thing that you need to do is give yourself permission to treat social media like a playground, or treat whatever it is that you're doing like a playground, or like an experiment where you're just testing a bunch of different things, allowing whatever excites you to be executed and flourish. Because by simply just putting out everything that excites you, you're going to find that some things are just exciting for your personal life, some things you actually enjoy posting, and then some things actually you post and resonate with the audience. For me, that's when I started talking about personal development. I was doing these videos that were like coffee time, where I would like pour coffee into a fancy wine glass. I'd be in a robe and I would give different like perspective shifts around mindset. They really started to pick up traction, so I just kind of kept doing them. I also added in this series where I let my audience wake up with me, and it was just my way of trying to like get my audience to start their day on a good foot. I would give them a robe, I would light a candle, I would set intentions, I would make them a drink. At the time, I thought of my content as just creating this space where people felt welcomed and invited to be a part of, and I wanted that space to be consistent so that people felt secure and like they had a place to come to every morning. I would say I did about a month or two of experimenting before stumbling upon this concept, and before I knew it, I had hit 10,000 followers on TikTok rather quickly. I wasn't really thinking about how this would make me money. I was simply just getting excited about the idea that I was posting content that people were resonating with. But then I had this idea to create a video where I shared what I believed had gotten me to that 10,000 followers. And this is where things get really interesting. The first thing that was interesting about this video is that after I filmed it, I realized that even after editing the out of it, it was 3.5 minutes long. Now, at the time, TikTok, the norm was making like under 30-second videos. Like, posting minute-long videos were just starting to become a thing. I remember I was literally with my friends while I was editing this video, and I was walking around. I think we were at Ross, and I'm like, 3.5 minutes. No one's gonna watch a 3.5 minute video on TikTok. But there was something in my intuition that told me, like, post it. And so I did. And wouldn't you know, that video racked up hundreds of thousands of views, got me thousands of followers, and people started asking if I do consulting. There's a few reasons I think this video was successful. And I think these are things that anyone who creates content should start to think about when they want to stand out. One, kind of a badass power move to think I could post a 3.5-minute video on that platform at the time. What that said is that I wasn't trying to cater to an algorithm. I was simply creating the video that needed to be created in order to execute the message that I wanted to execute. Number two, I was not giving surface level advice, especially at that time. And I would say even now, most advice on around building your audience on social media was like, here's how to have a viral hook. Here's how to 10x your following using this trend. Here's the viral song that's going to help you explode, blah, 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 blah. I was coming at more of a high level of like how I had positioned myself, understanding visual branding, which is something no one was talking about at the time. And one of my strengths is that I'm really good at taking complex topics and making them really digestible for people. And so I think it was really easy to get through that video, even though I was talking about some conversations that were a little bit more nuanced. I didn't set up any consulting services yet because I was like, okay, this is just one video about social media. I kept doing the mindset stuff that was continuing to work well for me, but I also started to mix in some of this social media advice. Every video where I talked about social media was a hit. And I eventually had this genius idea for a series. I called it Creator Breakdown or something like that. And it was where I would take a creator who was doing really well and I would go into more of the psychology, branding, and positioning that this creator was doing in order to stand out amongst everybody else, which was different than steal the viral hook that this creator is using. I was really going into how this creator thought in order to grow. Now, this is where I did start to get a little bit more strategic because I knew by doing these videos, not only was I able to demonstrate my expertise, but I was also giving myself a networking opportunity to speak to some of these creators who had way bigger audiences than I did at the time. The first one I did got like 50,000 views. People were still asking me for consulting. The creator who I made that video on did reach out to me and she was like, I don't normally follow social media coaches, but you do have something different about the way you talk about this stuff. And I was like, thank you so much. I then did a couple more, but by far the one that blew up the biggest was one that I did on my now friend Justine, who you may know as Justine's Camera Roll. I think that video was like 7 minutes long and it still hit over 100,000 views. And because of the quality of what was in that video, it got me thousands of followers. It connected me with Justine, who I still talk to on a pretty regular basis today. And I believe it was around that time, maybe a little bit before that video, where I was like, okay, people are still asking me for consulting. I don't even really know what that looks like, but I'm just gonna throw up this thing. I made a stand store and I threw up this offer where I charged $100 to have a 45-minute conversation with me about social media growth. Y'all, this is where my journey gets a little unique. Pretty much immediately after launching that, I was getting bookings out the wazoo. I remember it was $100 for a single call, or I did a package of 3 for like $250 or something like that. I was getting multiple bookings every day, and my first month of business was a 5-figure month. I think I made around $12,000 in a single month. Mind you, I'm still working my 9-to-5 job. Luckily, that 9-to-5 job was remote. I was working my 9-to-5 job, and on top of that, I was taking like 4 to 5 calls every day of people booking sessions with me, and the continuous feedback that I got is that I am way undercharging. And you know, when the people who are paying you are telling you you're undercharging, that's probably a good sign that you should increase your prices. But here's the thing. I would not have had the courage to start doing this and start charging $500 an hour for a session right off the bat. A lot of people will tell you, oh, charge your worth, charge as much as you can right away. And it's not that that's bad advice, but what they miss is that oftentimes when you're starting something, you don't have the courage or the faith that anyone's gonna buy anything. And so what I always tell people is if undercharging yourself is going to give you that courage to just put the thing out and build up that stack of evidence that you are indeed someone that people will pay in order to have that product or that service or that education from you, do that, because you can always raise your prices. And that's what I did. I just kind of steadily kept raising my prices, and eventually I ended and capped at like $500 an hour before I now don't really do too much one-on-one consulting anymore. But my first 3 months in business were just catapulted success over and over again. I was making 7 to 10 minute deep dives on TikTok about growing on social media. And I just made sure each video was packed with value. I mean, these would have been YouTube videos. My first month was like $12,000. My second month, I think, was like $15,000. And then my third month, I had my first like $20,000 month. And I think there was one month, I don't know if it was like my fourth or fifth month, where I hit $30,000 in a single month. And so as you can imagine, at that point, my job was starting to be more of a hindrance to my success than it was helping me build my success. So I left my 9 to 5 job around that time. I'm still great friends with the owner of that company. I love them. It was all good. And I had jumped into this full time, and I was very smart right from the beginning because, again, I come from a financially unstable background. So most of that money I was getting, I was putting into savings. I think I had around $30,000 in savings because, quite honestly, like at the time, I didn't even know how I would spend that amount of money. Gotten a little better at it as times have gone on. I've become such a princess. Around that time, I had rescued a cat from outside my best friend's apartment. I promise this is really relevant to the story. He used to come up to the door all the time. We would feed him outside. He was so sweet. And I was always joking like, oh, what if I took him in? What if I took him in? At the time, I had only had my one cat that I had rescued from the Humane Society. And then he disappeared. And I'm such an animal person. Like, my heart shattered. We thought something had happened to him. We thought we thought the worst. 3 months later, he shows up and we see him and my best friend points him out and we're like, no way. And he's so skinny. He's not like, he's clearly hadn't eaten, blah, 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 blah. So that day I took him in. The next few months from that point would be nothing short of complete tumultuous chaos. I took him to the vet. They said he was okay, but something in my gut just said that he wasn't. And then from there, it was one thing after another. He had, I don't want to be gross, but he had a tapeworm that I watched him exercise. That was like, every vet I took him to was like, whoa. He was always sniffly. He didn't meow. Like, he would try to meow, but nothing would come out. And then all of a sudden I saw his breathing start to get faster and faster over time. He was eating a ton, but I started to see him get more tired, whatever. So we were going to the vet like, I would say once a week, if not more. Ultimately, what we found out was that he had, at the time, an incurable disease called FIP. I did exhaust all resources to try to cure him, even though it wasn't looking good, but ultimately it didn't work out. Now, I've been through some stuff in my life, but there is nothing that was more painful than that, partly because of how much I loved animals. But I think in that case in particular, it was also because it was the first time I had fought so hard for something and I didn't get the result I want. I mean, I was willing to fight for that baby forever. It was this moment where I realized that you can fight as hard as you want for something and it can still not work out. And up until this point in my life, that had just not been my experience. If I worked hard enough for something, I could fix it. I could have it. It would work out. And this time it didn't. I blamed myself for a while and felt like I had failed. I felt like I should have taken him in earlier, or that I should have, gotten this diagnosed earlier. The point of me telling you this story is that that was the start of a very big mental health decline for me. At the same time this was happening, I was also navigating complex relationships in my family who I would then later ultimately decide I would distance myself from. And on top of that were conversations around TikTok being banned, which is where I had built my entire audience. And so I thought that my success was about to be ruined the moment that before it really even began. The combination of all of those things put me in such a state where like I was completely useless. And because of that, my content wasn't performing well because my audience could feel that the energy wasn't there. I made almost no money in my business for 3 months. And the thing is, remember when I told you I had $30,000 in savings? Well, 10,000 of that had gone straight to, actually more than 10,000 of that had gone straight to trying to save this cat. More money on top of that went through, I think I had car issue or, there were some other big expenses that came up. And so 3 months in, like I had completely depleted my savings. I had nothing left. And it was like my back was against the wall. I had to figure out what I was going to do. And I wish I could tell you that there was this moment where I was like, I'm going to pull myself up and I'm going to figure it out. But no, I was applying to jobs on LinkedIn. I was like so close to accepting jobs, and I just wanted to get back to a point where I knew I could just do a job, money would come in my bank account, and I didn't have to think about anything outside of that. But the universe had other plans for me, because while I got some of the job positions offered or I got really close to certain ones, it just ended up I either didn't do it or I didn't get the job, whatever the case may be, but I just kind of stayed with it. Around this time, I started doing TikTok lives, which I give so much credit to TikTok Live because it literally is what saved my business. I was going live every day for like an hour or two, and it wasn't like I wasn't begging for galaxies. I was like selling my consulting. So I did these Ask Me Anything sessions where people could ask me anything about growing on social media. And because I'm just good at what I do, I was giving really nuanced, detailed, strong answers. And that was having my coaching sessions flying off the shelf. Had it not been for that, I would have been toast because my content was not performing well. Everything was relying on these lives. However, it was so unsustainable. Being live every day for hours, answering questions was exhausting, and then jumping on these calls that people were booking and helping them build, like, it was a sure path to burnout. So I knew I needed to figure something out, but that just gave me a space where I could reliably make money while I kind of healed. I started going to therapy. I went to therapy for around 6 months. And because like I have my degree in psychology and I'm really good at like implementing things that people tell me if I trust them. So I implemented everything my therapist told me, and she really helped me get back on my feet. At that point, I had decided to distance myself from certain people in my family, which while hard cleared up a lot of the mental taxation that was weighing on me. I still would randomly cry for my cat. I still randomly cry for that cat. Grief is not something that, really goes away. But I knew how to just accept that this was part of it and not create a story that this meant I was a failure or that I was weak or I was incapable. I kind of looked at it as it's a good thing that I'm crying because it meant that I really cared for something. Hi, editing Donavan here. I also want to add that through therapy, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, severe anxiety, and severe depression. The reason I want to share that is not for sympathy, but I just want to share that even after therapy, it wasn't that I was just like all better and was able to work through at 100% again. Like getting back to a point where I was functional did take time. For example, every time my other cat, Rain, literally would like breathe wrong, sneeze, look the wrong way, or move slower than usual, he's probably so sick of me because I literally would I would run him to the vet, go to the vet, I'm gonna fix you. Like for the smallest thing, I had such health anxiety for Rain at that point. And then with distancing myself from certain family members, without getting into too much detail, like I came home every day, like I checked under my couch, I checked everywhere because I was worried about like my safety being threatened, like whatever. So I was still in the thick of everything. Also, for those of you whose heartstrings were pulled by the whole story with my cat Blue, I do want to let you know that I did eventually adopt another cat and rescue him from the Humane Society. And the crazy thing about him is that he is like almost exactly like Blue. Sometimes I like to think that Blue sent Echo to me because he really did help heal me. He was such a major part in me believing that like I'm capable of taking care of an animal and that what happened to Blue wasn't just one big failure on my part. And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have you in my life, huh? But I was still left with this thing of TikTok might be banned. And even aside from TikTok potentially being banned, I wasn't doing well with my content there. So that's when I started posting on Instagram. For everyone who has an Instagram account that they think is dead or that they haven't used in a while and you think you can't rebuild it, let this be your sign that you can. This was the same Instagram I used for my Taekwondo stuff. It had like 10,000 followers on it because I had lost a lot of followers from not posting. Complete shift where I started talking about social media and personal branding and mindset, and it was not taking off. Like for 4 to 6 months, I was getting 50 likes on a page that had over 10,000 followers. And yeah, my friends followed me there. People from high school followed me there. So I had to sit here and post publicly and watch things flop publicly. And I am sure that people were talking or maybe they weren't, but I know that I felt embarrassed. But I had just decided in my mind that none of this is going to matter when it actually works. All these people who may potentially be saying something now, whatever, aren't going to have shit to say when this works. So I just kept going. I posted every day without thought. I tried to make a better video every single time. I played around with different methods. I did like a PowerPoint kind of thing. I did, I did all these different things until something finally hit. And the videos that hit were actually the most simple videos I had created. I would literally just prop my phone up, read my audience for 47 seconds or a minute and post it. I used the front facing camera. I looked a mess. Usually I would just like wake up. I had bedhead. I was wearing a hoodie, like whatever. And I would just post it and those started to take off. And it's funny because my growth on Instagram was very similar to my growth on TikTok, where it started with mindset. And then I integrated the social media kind of stuff once I started building substance there. And then business started to pick up. I'm going to tell you all something right now. If you are not posting on either Instagram or YouTube or both, you are going to have a really hard time sustaining your business, sustaining your career as a creator in general. Brands do not prioritize TikTok as much as they do Instagram or YouTube, unless you're doing like TikTok shop stuff. Like you can make bank from TikTok shop. I have a client who makes bank from TikTok shop. Instagram is a lot more stable than TikTok because your views are going to followers and non-followers. So not every video is going to take off with non-followers, but at least a percentage of your audience will see it. And that just helped create more predictable viewership, engagement, sales, etc. Instagram also just has more tools for selling, like using Instagram stories, using DMs that are far better than the features that are similar to that on TikTok. And so after a tumultuous first year of fighting for my life to even care to exist, and I was talking to friends and like my mom almost every day, just like panicking that like everything I'm doing is a mistake, that I'm gonna be a failure. Bless them. Thank you so much to them, because I'm sure that was exhausting, and they held space for me and allowed me to express that. I had actually met one of my really close friends now at that time, and she was really such an important part because she would get me out of the house and we would go and to Home Goods and we would go eat and we would get coffee together every day, and that really helped me start to feel like a human again. Shout out to my friend Nicolette. But at the very end of my first year in business, things started to turn around and business started to get good again. And then we enter into my second year of business, which is what I just wrapped up. So thanks to therapy and thanks to also just going through that really difficult time, I was much better at regulating my nervous system through the highs and lows of business. I also started getting more strategic at this point in time because I realized that selling single one-on-one calls and even just doing long-term consulting, because I did start to do some like long-term consulting toward the end of my first year, and that did help stabilize a little bit. At the end of the day, I didn't like it because even with the long-term one-on-one consulting, like if one of those clients left, it was devastating. I've only had to fire one client in my entire life for some racist remarks. That's a story for a different day. But like, she was my biggest client. She was literally responsible for half my income. And I wish I could sit here and say that it was so hard for me to let her go. And I had this big decision between, was I going to just keep going for the income? Something about me is that if you cross my morals and my ethics, it's not hard for me to let you go. It's not. And that wasn't the first time that it happened. Anytime someone had approached me and they sit here and they stand for some stuff that I just do not believe in, even if it meant like I may potentially not pay my bills, it's always been so easy for me to be like, no. That just comes down to a trait that I've had since I was literally like born, which is that I don't know how to do things that I'm not emotionally invested in. My family used to rightfully so worry that I wasn't going to make it in this world because I just physically didn't know how to do things that I didn't see a purpose in. But hey, here we are. So far, it's working out. So going into my second year of business, I had been through enough things to know how to regulate myself through the highs and lows of business. And I wanted to start setting up offers that were going to allow me to be a bit more stable. But I didn't know what that was yet. And I was still building my audience at the time. One thing I did know is that I wanted my content to not just be about teaching on Instagram. I really wanted my content to position me as a thought leader, as somebody who people can look up to, as somebody who offers perspective in this space. I didn't want the sole focus of my content to be just, oh, this is his advice. This is how good his advice is. I wanted people to know my journey. I decided to launch my first group program. This was a cohort that was 4 weeks long. I think the first round I charged $500 a person for it. This was really scary because I had never done a group program before. I'm like, okay, what if like only 2 people sign up and like I'm sitting here conducting a call for 2 people? And also this was my first time trying to like sell something directly on Instagram. I don't really sell in my content. I just kind of give really good thoughts and perspective and advice, and people just kind of come. But one of my dear friends, Lisa, she had just seen something from an email that she had gotten from some business coach that talked about selling. And he was talking about how like he sells by doing something so simple. He doesn't try to like do a bunch of flashy stuff. He'll simply send an email saying, hey, I'm taking on this many people who want to accomplish X, and there's this many spots available. Message me if you're interested in. So simple. No big funnel, no big thing, no big this. And I was like, as somebody who hates selling things, I'm going to try it. That sounds simple enough. And so I literally sent one email and one Instagram story, both saying the same thing. I am taking on 10 to 15 people who want to learn to build a personal brand from scratch online. If that's something that would interest you, spots are limited. Send me a DM or reply to this email. Y'all, I received 300 DMs that day. 300! And I didn't have many chat or automation set up, so I was responding to all 300 of these people. And in under 24 hours, I had 17 slots booked, ready to go, paid. This is when I started to get back into the territory of things not just doing good enough, but like actually like starting to get back to being ahead. I had gotten $7,000 from that. And then I think in that time I had made some money from doing something else too that had worked out. I don't remember, maybe it was a brand deal or something, but that was my first 5-figure month in a really long time. So finally I felt like I was like getting back on solid ground. I ran this cohort 2 times that year. Both times it sold really well, but I got to this point where I just realized like this just still requires constant selling. And just the way that I am, I just don't want something where I'm like always having to sell it. And that led me to creating the Creative Corner. The Creative Corner is the membership that I run. It's my favorite part of my business, where people get a co-working space, a community, and a coach all in one spot. I forgot to mention this, but I actually did do this in my first year of business. I charged like $50 a month for it. We only met twice a week at that time, and it was starting to do well. I was definitely undercharging for it. And then because of all the stuff with my cat, I ultimately closed it down because I just realized I wasn't giving my best. And if I'm not giving my best, I'm not going to take people's money. But year 2, I had like decided that I'm going to jump back into doing this. And this is going to be something that compounds over time. But it was scary for me because most of the things that I had sold so far are like multiple hundreds or even like $1,000 at a time. And this was me asking for $99 a month, which was not a small amount of money, but small in comparison to like how much money I need to make a month. And so it was a situation where I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to need like 100-ish members to make this work. And I got it set up and I marketed it first to people who had joined my cohort because I figured they would be the best candidates because the cohort was kind of similar to the setup that I had for the Creative Corner. And that did work. About 6 or 7 of them did join the Creative Corner from the cohort. But I didn't make it public for a few months after that because I was just really nervous. I was just worried it wouldn't work out. So it was literally just me, and sometimes it would just be me and one other person in that Creative Corner call. But they got a lot of value out of it. So it ended up working out. But finally, I made it public and it started to do really well. Let me tell you all something. Monthly recurring revenue is a great nervous system regulation tool. This isn't always possible depending on what it is that you do, but if you can find a way to set something up that at least lets you know that you are going into each month with a certain amount of money. The Creative Corner now sits at around 60 members, and I've realized that I'm going to cap it at 75, but I did just increase the price. It was $99 a month. Now it's $97 for the first month, and because I want to prove the value, and then it goes to $197 every month after that. Because what I know is that once people join the Creative Corner, and if they get into a call and they participate, like they're going to want to stay because the value is there. People have built whole creator careers. People who didn't have audiences now have an audience, and they're negotiating the same brand deals I'm negotiating. People have built their first offer in a built their business inside the Creative Corner, launched it, and got their first sales. Like people who were stagnant for a long, like the value is there. So I had no issue increasing the price, and also it's just necessary too in order to make this sustainable. The other thing that year 2 brought me that I didn't have in year 1 is brand deals. I have worked with Adobe, Meta, Instagram, Kajabi, TikTok, all these people this year. I've made around $70-something thousand in brand deals this year. I don't have management. I'm not represented by anybody. I don't even do any outreach. These are people who just came and went into my inbox because they wanted to work with me. How did I do this? The Creative Corner filling up so rapidly and those brand deals coming in are in large part due to one challenge series that I did, my 500 posts in 30-day challenge. This is where I developed this strategy where I was going to try to get 500 pieces of content posted in 30 days. I wasn't creating 500 pieces of content. I was spreading out content into spaces that equaled 500. I was probably creating around 10 to 12 pieces of content per day, but it became 16 to 17 posts per day through repurposing and readjusting, etc., etc. This was a brilliant move for me for a few reasons. One, it positioned me as not being the teacher. It positioned me as being the guinea pig, the experiment, which is what I wanted. Because remember, a big goal for me this year was to build a community around who I am rather than just what the level of advice I can give. That volume got me a lot of visibility because I was still able to create really good content content, because when I'm in alignment, like I can churn them out. Every day was just like from morning to night was creating, editing, posting, managing client calls, etc., etc. And doing this challenge made me come across as more of an influencer than just a consultant. And that's why now I'm able to ride this wave where like I have a business, but I also come across as a content creator. And so I kind of get the Hannah Montana best of both worlds. It also is what gave me permission to start posting more about myself. I've had posts about how my house is a mess go viral as a result of chasing my dream. I've had my birthday post go viral or whatever. I finally felt like I had an audience that didn't just care about how useful I am, but actually cared about me. This challenge almost doubled my audience. I had about 60 to 70,000 followers on both Instagram and TikTok. By the end of that challenge, I had hit over 100K on both platforms. And I don't want to make it sound like you have to have a lot of followers in order to be successful. I started making a full-time income with like 20,000 followers on one platform. You totally can do that, but I definitely stepped into another league once I hit that 100K. I am now one of the people that are considered at the top of my field. And then my last source of income this year was that I did still do some one-on-one consulting, but I did it as just a 12-month package where I charged $5,000 for 12 weeks and then it was done at the 12 weeks. I liked this because it just gave more accountability to both myself and the client. We weren't sitting here just relying on this ongoing relationship where there's no measurable end. It was 12 weeks to like give you the skills and knowledge to build a personal brand, and then we're done, which just kind of attracted a better clientele and also produced better results. I'm now at a point where the Creative Corner brings me about $5,000 in monthly recurring revenue. I think for going into my third year, I'm really going to step back from doing any one-on-one stuff. I think I'm going to just take maybe 2 to 3 clients per year. I'm not going to be relying on brand deals, but like keep them coming, because 5 figures for making a couple videos, poof. My Camry battery died because I don't know how to shut them up. I don't know if there would be any new people here who sat here and listened to this, but I really wanted to document it to show you that there is no way you're going to plan yourself into success. You can go in with a plan, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong to maybe have some idea of what you want to do, but just know that it's probably not gonna work out the way that you thought it would. But this is especially for the person who knows that they're destined for more, but doesn't know what that more looks like. Know that you can simply decide to show up and follow your excitement, follow your curiosity, follow and perform and execute on whatever you feel in the moment, even if you don't know exactly where it's all going to lead. Because in my experience with the way that I work, if I just simply follow my excitement, I always end up where I'm supposed to be. Every time my content ends up not performing well, or I have a slow business month outside of, when I was going through a mental health episode, it always links back to I start to try to overly plan everything. And that can be hard, because I wish I was the kind of person who just put a roadmap out and planned for it and knew exactly how this was going to go. But in reality, the way that I work, the way that I am successful isn't by having a plan. It's by having unrelenting self-trust. It's by being incredibly adaptable. I always tell my clients that building a personal brand, at least one that is authentic, is going to bring up all your gunk. Every fear, every limiting belief, every way that you hide is going to be on the forefront the moment that you decide to start documenting and sharing your message on the internet. And that can be scary, but it's also incredibly worth it, because on the other side, if you choose to just continue to work through all of that doubt, all of those limiting beliefs, not only will you probably have a brand that you're really proud of, but you will also feel healed. You will also feel like you've worked through things. You will feel like you are someone who is deserving of trusting themselves. My goals for my third year are to hit multi-6 figures, but not just hit multi-6 figures at the cost of my well-being. Like, I want to hit multi-6 figures while actually working less. So if you want me to create a video like this where I share my full plan for how I'm going to do that, let me know. I'll make that video. If you stuck around this long and you like this video, it would mean so much if you could give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're new here. Hit the bell icon to be notified with new uploads. And also, I will read all of your comments. I care more about comments than I care about views. So if you got value, like, tell me what you learned from this video and what you maybe would like to see in the future. Good luck. And as always, I'm rooting for you.